This is episode number 18 with Dr. Benjamin Alter, creating effective metabolism for better weight loss results. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm very excited to introduce my dear friend, Dr. Benjamin Alter. He has helped a couple of our clients go to cleansing to give better weight loss results, and he has a lot of knowledge about food and how can you improve your weight loss. And without hesitation, I thought about interview him and give you his tips so you can put it into practice and start losing weight. With all the knowledge that I'm putting right here, you should have no restrictions and excuses for you to lose weight. So without further introduction, let's listen to my friend talk about how can you improve your metabolism to lose weight. At CBF, we know that for you to change your body, you need to change your mind. Exercise and eating healthy is only part of the plan. We care about our members as we care about our family because our members become our family. It is not about competition, but support. It is not about being the strongest or the fastest, but about you defeating your negative self. It is about working together and making the task challenging and have fun. By the end, what matters is not how hard the session was, but that you take control of your mind so you can take control of your body. My name is Sandro Torres, and I'm happy you are part of our family. Welcome to Custom Body Fitness. Welcome everybody to another interview here at Custom Body Fitness. I'm Sandro Torres, the founder of Custom Body Fitness, writer who wrote the book Weight Loss Permanently and Finding Genuine Happiness. And now we have today my friend Ben Alter. He's a doctor and he has helped a couple of my clients with cleansing. And actually, even though I specialize in weight loss, he also has helping us with that. So I'm very interested on knowing a couple tips about his career, about what he does to help people be healthy and lose weight.
Yeah.
Ben, welcome.
Thank you. Such an honor to talk about something that I'm, super passionate about. Like, this is my life. So it's just an easy conversation to talk about the things that I love.
Okay, perfect. So let's begin by asking you, how do you end up in doing what you're doing, and what are your credentials? What people should believe you?
Oh, well, I'm a naturopathic doctor, which means that I went to naturopathic medical school, which is a graduate program. Really the curriculum that I went through is very much like most conventional medical programs in terms of basic sciences, biochemistry, pathology, physiology, anatomy, all that stuff, getting that out of the way. And then, of course, pharmaceutical medicine, dozens of hours in pharmacology. But in addition to all of the stuff learned in conventional medical programs, the naturopathic curriculum includes nutritional science, herbal medicine, homeopathy, physical medicine, and things that allow the body and support the body in healing naturally.
So you could be in a hospital or in a clinic with a white uniform prescribing drugs if you wanted to do that.
It depends on the licensure state by state. In Colorado, it's a little bit different. There's not many privileges, but to me, that's a really good thing because I don't want the privileges to be a conventional medical doctor. That's not why I went to medical school. I went to medical school to understand how the body heals itself and to promote that process naturally. But in a lot of states, like Oregon, for example, Arizona, California, and there are others, but naturopathic doctors and naturopathic medicine is really primary care in those states. So they do have prescription privileges and whatnot, which again, not something that I feel like I'm missing out on here in Colorado.
Correct. So you could do it, but it's not.
If I lived there, I do have a license or I did have a license in Arizona and California, no more. But yeah, I could move to one of those places and wear the white coat. And people just to, naturopathic doctors in Colorado, can wear a white coat too. It's just a piece of clothing. You could wear a white coat if you want. Anyone can wear a white coat. But it's funny that you bring that up, because it does. I'm really passionate about kind of breaking that paradigm of the doctor has all the knowledge and wisdoms and answers in medicine, because in actuality, it's each individual who's responsible for their health. And the doctor actually means teacher. In Latin, it comes from the root docere, which means to teach. So that's what I feel like my role is, to teach and show people how they can heal themselves. Because, as we know, it all comes down to how we're eating, how we're living, how we're hydrating ourselves, how we're moving, how we're strengthening ourselves. And that, even though you're a great trainer and everything like that, you can't do the work for other people.
Yes.
I can't do the work for other people either.
Yes.
So it's you're a teacher, you're an educator, you're a coach. I kind of view myself in the same vein, so to speak.
So that's I think you brought a good point. The reason why I ask you about that is because I want people to understand that you do have the knowledge than a doctor that is in a hospital. You just decide not to do that and go to the natural path.
Yeah.
And a good point that you brought right now, it's that we have the power to help people by teaching, but the decision is their decision.
Yeah.
So great. How do you? I learned from you, making some research, not straightforward from you, is that you had 2 injuries, and those 2 injuries led you into the doctor career. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I've had more than 2. I've tended to injure myself a lot over the years, but the first real thing the first injury that inspired me to be a doctor was, I think, when I was in 8th grade. Broke my wrist and saw an orthopedic surgeon who cracked it and set it, reduced the fracture, and realigned the bones. And of course, I was in a cast for 6 weeks or so, but good as new. And then so that inspired me to kind of do the pre-med thing and go into medicine. And I actually wanted to be a surgeon and fix people and stuff. But then in my last year of college at the University of Arizona, I had another injury. Broke my wrist again, this time mountain biking, and that immobilized my right hand. I couldn't use my right hand, and specifically my right thumb, for like.
So that was the same hand.
I think so, but it was really my thumb that was injured for 2 or 3 months, and I saw the hand surgeon again, and he said, you'll probably develop some arthritic symptoms in your 30s. And here I am, like 35, no arthritis, right? Because we know that we can control our destiny. But in any event, that kind of shook me up a little bit. And I was immobilized on the right side of my body. And I started brushing my teeth with my left hand. I had always been so right-handed. And for people who know about kind of the brain neurophysiology and whatnot, when we're activating our right side of our body, we're actually activating our left brain, and our left brain is associated with more analytical, scientific, data-driven stuff, and the right brain and left-handedness is more associated with creativity, artistic, abilities and whatnot. So anyways, I started using my left hand for everything: eating, wiping my butt, everything, because I couldn't do anything with my right hand for like 3 months.
But you make it sound like it's nothing, but really takes a lot of practice, right?
It was a huge challenge, but I bring this story up just because that opportunity really allowed my brain to balance, I feel. And that allowed me to be more connected with authentic inspiration rather than what I felt I should be doing. I was kind of more inspired to do what was more aligned for myself.
Intuitive.
More tapped into more of my intuition and kind of that deeper wisdom that is always there. But in any event, I kind of let go of the conventional medicine path and just opened up. And one thing led to another. And here we are, naturopathic medicine. And I couldn't be happier or more, blessed at the opportunities that unfold.
Okay, another thing that I research about you is that you discover that what you're talking about, that or thoughts can make us sick.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about that.
How our thoughts make us sick?
Yeah, and how do you approach that?
Yeah, well, this is such a blessing because, like you said, thoughts make us sick, but it's also thoughts that heal us, or thoughts that can heal us. And yeah, my experience of this was when I was living abroad, and I was chronically ill, and I thought it was something that I was eating or drinking, but it was really just my state of mind, and I was in a word, I guess, lonely, and felt alone and isolated and kind of out of alignment, and just kind of recognized that, hey, here I am, nothing's wrong with me, I'm okay, I'm alive, I have this incredible opportunity to be living and working abroad. Why am I stressed? Why am I fearful? Why am I worried? Everything's gonna be okay. I'm not here forever. This is impermanent. And that kind of insight really allowed me to take more control of my experience. And so yeah, that's now still very much a big part of my passion, is supporting people in understanding how their thoughts are influencing their physiology. And to answer your question in terms of what the connection is, it's the field of, it's called psychoendoneuroimmunology, which is the connection between our psychology, our thoughts, the thinking mind, our neurology, the nervous system, specifically the autonomic nervous system, and our endocrinology, which is, of course, our hormones, which are chemical messengers that tell our body everything, and our immunology, our immune system, which is regulating of course, the degree to which we're able to mount an immune response to a pathogen, a virus, or whatever like that, but also the degree to which our inflammatory pathways are activated. So in a nutshell, every moment our physiology is being modified based on our psychology. So that's, again, a really cool thing. And that's not to say that we need to be perfect and we need to have positive thinking, but if we let go of
Worries?
if we just recognize our thoughts for what they are, which are just passing energies, then we're more grounded in the moment, and those thoughts that have controlled us no longer do.
So, two questions. First, how do you think? So, do you really think that many people right now are sick because of the way they think? They're overweight because of the way they think. That's the first question. And the second question is, if it's that true, how and what they can do to turn that around?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's obviously health and dis-ease have a lot of factors, but I do feel like our state of mind is really at the root of it all. Because if we're in a peaceful state of mind, if we're in a joyful, content state of mind, then we're naturally more connected with inspiration, creativity, energy. That's going to move us to make the common sense decisions to eat food that is going to nourish us, to move our bodies in a way that's going to keep us feeling good, to stay hydrated so that we continue feeling good and energized. And if we're in a stressful state of mind, then we're simply going to feel disconnected from that natural creativity and inspiration and wisdom that guides us in common sense ways. And we've all had these experiences when we feel stressed out and it's like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. I just need to do this. And we neglect ourselves. But if we trust, if we're grounded in trust, then we always have time to prioritize our health and our well-being.
What do you think some people don't prioritize their health? What do you think they let go? What do you think they prefer to be sick? I don't want to use actually, subconsciously, they may prefer to be sick, but not consciously. What do you think people, they neglect their health, their movement, their exercise, their thoughts, and their eating, and they focus on other things, such as only material things? With this in mind, I'm not saying it's bad to work for material things. I'm only saying they put all the energy in that area or other areas such as pleasures, drinking, and things like that.
Yeah. So the question is, why do people do that?
Yeah.
Well, my understanding why we tend to do that as human beings is because a lot of us live in a delusion of what I like to call outside-in reality, where we think that our human experiences are coming from the outside. If we work, if we've got a better job and we're making more money, we're going to be more content. If we have a happier relationship, then we're going to be more peaceful. If we, if we lose 40 pounds, then we're going to feel better. Our people are living with the delusion that the outside circumstances are what dictate our internal reality, our internal feeling. But it's really our internal feeling that is generated from within. So this delusional reality, which again, I think we all tend to slip into, even with a conceptual understanding of it, we all tend to slip into it. For example, I bring this example up often. When my wife, Susanna, is upset, everyone gets upset, right? I can tell she's kind of in a low mood, and I'll say, "Hey, Susanna, what's wrong?" And that's an innocent question that I ask, what's wrong? And the fact is, nothing has to be wrong for us to be in a low mood. We just are taking our thoughts seriously. So me saying what's wrong is kind of reaffirming this outside in, there's something wrong and there's something we need to fix. So life is like this, right? Life is up and down and a total roller coaster and waves and highs and lows. And it's just happening. It's just happening.
Well, it's not called depression and PSD. No, it's a guy.
Yeah, this is yeah, exactly. Some people go down here and they say, "Oh my gosh, I've got depression."
I think the reason why I tell you that is because you know how they label those things, and I think you're right on the point. Like, that's life. Right. That's not an issue. That's life. Right?
But if we go down here and we're in a low state, and then we go to the doctor, and the doctor reaffirms to us, "Oh yeah, it sounds like there is something wrong. There's a pill for that." And then we get in that we're reaffirmed in that delusional reality that our outside circumstances are created, or our inside reality is created from our outside circumstances. So in a nutshell, I do believe that it's that delusional reality that a lot of people tend to slip into. And I say that with full awareness that me, being a human being, still and always will forever slip into that. And of course, my conceptual understanding of this helps, but then just being awake and present in life helps me remember to come back to the present moment and, recognize the true nature of who I am and where my experience is coming from.
So let me know if I understand this correctly. So the fact that you understand that your happiness, your content is not based in the exterior things, makes you be aware that it's coming from inside. You need to take care of your health because of that.
I wouldn't even say that. I would say that taking care of myself, feeding myself, brushing my teeth, going to bed, waking up, moving my body, talking with people, that's just like natural. That's just natural inspiration, natural common sense. I always like to point to nature, right? So, like squirrels or deer.
Yeah.
It's
they don't think, they just do it.
They don't need to take any seminar or class how to lift weights and stay in shape and eat right. They're just connected with natural common sense. Yeah.
So what you tell me, to answer the question I asked, is that you don't do any effort to make those good decisions because you don't live in that delusional world. If you were living in that delusional world, then you need to be aware to make those decisions instead of just being natural.
Yeah. In another word, a lot of people rely on willpower. right? You hear that term
Yeah.
a lot. Well, you just got to get up and do it. Just got to do it. And willpower is what happens when we're kind of, it's okay to get up and do it, but it's a lot better from my perspective to feel naturally inspired, intrinsically motivated to do it and not have to force myself to do anything, right? Sometimes it's like, okay, I've got this interview with Sandro. I don't really feel like it, but I committed to it. It's on the calendar. I got to do it. Of course, that wasn't the case. I felt naturally motivated and inspired to come here. But in any case, I think when it comes to our tending to our basic needs, it's good to stay connected to our well-being first, because then when we're in a state of peace and well-being, all the common sense, natural, healthy habits, again, from my understanding, just follow. That being said, and I'm sure we'll get into it, there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of analysis paralysis.
But
and
maybe, because you mentioned it, maybe people get into that misinformation and analysis and so on because they're not in that natural state that you're talking about.
That's a good point. When we're in a peaceful state, the things click. We hear something and it's like that person just said the truth.
You don't have to go and research it and make sure and confirm it and go to the doctor and make sure that
exactly. We can do that, but there's still something that resonates as true that it just comes naturally.
Okay, let's talk about the next question. Attached with everything they've already been talking about. Maybe you're ready to answer the question, but maybe you want to summarize it or add something else. We are our own healer, right?
Absolutely.
Tell us about that.
What else could I say? And back to kind of the earlier topic that was brought up, I'll just say that when we are broken, back to my broken bones and whatnot, I go to the doctor and the doctor puts some pins in my wrist or a cast. But the healing, like the fusion of the bone, the healing of the skin to create a scar, that is happening. My body does that. My body heals itself, So that's just kind of basic fact. And then of course there's some symptoms that a lot of people say, oh, I've got a stuffy nose, what's wrong with me? I've got a fever. What's wrong with me? I've got a stomach ache. What's wrong with me? Well, those symptoms, whether they're acute symptoms or chronic symptoms, those symptoms are not a problem. They're evidence that the body is working. They're the body's answer to problems.
Let me add to that a little bit. And I have a question referred to that. I learned that, of course, when you have a fever, your body's is promoting heat to fight the virus, whatever virus it is. Mm-hmm. And your body, it's promoting that heat on purpose to defeat the enemy. If you go into cold, then the virus recovers life, and then it's trying to fight the body back. Mm-hmm. So a fever is not a symptom that you're sick because of the fever. The fever, it's it's not a symptom because you're sick. It's a symptom of your body fighting against.
Yeah, it's evidence of health.
Yeah.
A fever is evidence of health. In fact, a lot of people who are frail and less vital and elderly, when they get sick, they have a quote unquote low grade fever, 99.5, maybe 99.8. When a child gets sick, it's very common for them to have a high fever, 103, 104, 105. That's good. We should all have high fevers. And one, naturopathic kind of therapeutic is actually using water and saunas and hydrotherapy, it's called, to raise the body temperature, so that we can, really accelerate the immune response and support the body's natural ability to heal.
Okay, going back to where you were explaining, you said that you had in your hand two pins to actually hold the bones, but the healing, it's happening in your own body. Please explain this to me. Some people can say that a pill to heal something or insulin for diabetes or things like that could be those pins, and it might not be those pins.
Yeah. So well, so yeah, pills and different procedures and protocols and whatnot can certainly be effective in managing symptoms. But, for example, if someone, the diabetes example, being such a common thing, if someone has diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and they're on blood sugar controlling medications, whether it's insulin or metformin or anything else, those pills, those chemicals are helping to regulate the biochemistry and the physiology, but the underlying disease process is persisting, which will manifest somewhere else. A great example is also cancer. Cancer, when people are diagnosed with cancer, they get chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. That's kind of the standard of care, and I'm not opposed to those treatments. I'm not taking a stance one way or the other, but the recurrence of cancer is very common. People always talk about the 2-year survival rate, 4-year survival rate, 5-year survival rate, and different cancers are different, but the recurrence of cancer is very common in general, and that's because the conditions that created the cancer generally are not changed, and those conditions are how we're eating, the water that we're drinking, the air that we're breathing, the toxicities that we're exposed to, the movement, our muscles and our body composition, these kind of the conditions that create cancer are still there. So my recommendation is always, sure, you can have your surgery, you can even have some chemotherapy, but why don't we change the environment in your body so that we stop creating cancer, right? So that we're actually curing it rather than just cutting it out. We're curing the condition.
Yeah.
And the cancer is a great example, but the same goes for heart disease, which is of course the number one killer. Statin medications that control cholesterol. Turns out they're really good at controlling cholesterol. They're not that good at preventing heart attacks, because cholesterol turns out is just one factor in the creation of atherosclerosis and heart attacks and strokes.
Okay, so now let's get to the real conversation. Okay, we're gonna talk a little bit about weight loss. We're gonna I researched a couple of things. One of them, you're a big supporter of a vegan diet, organic vegan diet. Tell me why.
Yeah, well, first of all, personally, I try to not use the word vegan, just because a lot of people associate veganism with more of the ideological thing, which, I don't really, that's not the purpose of this conversation. That's not the purpose of my profession or my role. But what I call it, and the other thing is, a lot of vegan tells us what you're not eating, right? Vegans don't eat meat, dairy, eggs, animal products, and that's it, right? But what I describe my way of eating is whole food, plant-based, right? Because I'm eating whole foods in their natural, intact forms predominantly, and plants only. For example, olives versus olive oil, because olive oil is a processed plant food. Brown rice and not brown rice pasta. Wheat berries, or rather than wheat flour, for example. So the intact whole plant food is kind of the key of whole food plant-based nutrition. And you're asked why?
Yes.
Why? Well, I like to come at this from a few different levels. One is the basic science, like biochemistry, understanding how our bodies convert food and fuel into cellular energy, which we require the macronutrients, we require carbohydrates, but we also require an abundance of micronutrients, B vitamins, minerals, and whatnot to run our cellular machinery. So from a basic science perspective, whole plant foods provide the body everything that we need in kind of synergistic balance. Nature knows how to package food.
Why can I take vitamins
Uh,
instead?
well,
Or can I?
well, you certainly can, but the nature knows how to package the food in synergistic balance a lot better than any vitamin manufacturer. So, for example, vitamin C is a common supplement. And there are different foods that are rich in vitamin C. For example, amla berry is a food that's rich in vitamin C. And amla berry, I forget how much vitamin C is in a tablespoon of amla berry powder, which is the common way that it's taken in. But it's something like 500 milligrams or something like that, half a gram of vitamin C. And if you take, what I'm trying to say is the kind of antioxidant potential, the bioavailability, the way that vitamin C actually translates into making an impact in our body. The 500 milligrams in amla powder is way more potent and powerful than even 2 or 3 grams of a synthetic vitamin C.
And why is that?
Because it contains other bioflavonoids, other phytonutrients that are built into the berry. Also fiber, and also, foods contain water and all the other things that kind of create the synergy, rather than you just get a big dose of something out of context. And there's a few exceptions where, maybe it makes sense to take a therapeutic dose of something. So I'm not completely against supplements, but when I'm talking about health and creating health, supplements are called supplements for a reason. It's because they supplement a foundation of health. Otherwise, they would be called foundation-ins.
Okay. Okay, so how do you think organic and whole foods do help with weight loss?
Well, it's not too much about thinking, it's about understanding science. And the fact is that whole plant foods are naturally carbohydrate rich, meaning that they have carbohydrates in them, and naturally lower in fat, and naturally a little bit lower in protein. So this is really good. And a lot of people, especially in our society, are carbophobic. They're fearful of carbohydrates. Anything that resembles a carbohydrate, they think that it causes weight gain. But carbohydrates are fundamentally, you open the first chapter of any biochemistry textbook and you see that carbohydrates are fundamentally the primary fuel source for every cell in the body. Okay, and so anytime there's carbohydrates in our bloodstream, which by the way is all the time, even when we're on a ketogenic diet, even when we're on a fat-only diet, we still have blood sugar, otherwise we're dead. Okay, so carbohydrates are the fundamental fuel source for our cells. So when we're eating a whole food plant-based diet that's naturally rich in carbohydrates, naturally balanced with fat and protein, naturally very nutrient dense vitamins, phytonutrients, antioxidants, those carbohydrates are converted into cellular energy to generate energy for the body, to promote healing, to promote vitality, to promote muscle strength and building in the gym, to also promote weight release, because weight gain is a consequence of an inefficient metabolism. When we eat food, our food should be converted into cellular energy. But people who have an inefficient metabolism, they eat food and we get a little bit of energy, but then we also retain some of the energy from that food as weight on our bodies.
And sorry for interrupting. And why is that the people have an efficient metabolism?
Because they're eating foods that are deficient in nutrients, because our metabolism requires nutrients, and also they're eating foods that have too much fat. Too much fat and the combination of fat and carbohydrates causes an inefficient metabolism, otherwise known as insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is, of course, the underlying cause of type 2 diabetes. A lot of people just talk about insulin and hear about insulin in the context of diabetes, But insulin is, of course, the hormone that allows our cells to access carbohydrates, sugar, to create cellular energy. And if we have an underlying insulin resistant state, then we don't have access to the sugars that we're eating, to the carbohydrates that we're eating. So those sugars are going to circulate in our bloodstream and cause a quote unquote high blood sugar phenomenon. And then for some people, they stay in our body and are accumulated as excess weight on the body.
So that's why cleansings are good.
Well, a cleanse, not all.
So there. I know you're gonna answer this. It's gonna be a long answer.
Yeah.
But before we jump to that, before you give me that answer, just want to make a quick parenthesis in what we were talking about the whole foods. Whole foods are the efficient foods for your body, for your metabolism to be efficient. What foods are people eating that not make the metabolism efficient?
So what are your question is, what are some examples of foods that cause an inefficient metabolism? So processed foods, otherwise known as empty calories, refined flours, processed sugars, also oils, of course, pure fat with no real nutrition. These kind of foods are causing inefficient metabolism because they create nutritional depletion. We don't have the micronutrients necessary to run the metabolic process.
So
those are one. And then
Go ahead.
the others, and this is the controversial one, but you invited me here for a reason, so I'm not going to hold out on the truth that I see. Animal products can cause an inefficient metabolism because animal products don't have carbohydrates, except for dairy, right? In the form of lactose. And a lot of people think that's a good thing, to eat foods that don't have carbohydrates, just fat and protein.
Because of that same thing that you say.
Carbophobic. People are afraid of carbohydrates. So animal products are the perfect solution to carbophobia. But again, chapter 1 of any basic biochemistry textbook, primary fuel source for every cell in the body is carbohydrates. Animal products don't provide any of that. They provide fat and protein. And also the other thing that interferes with metabolism, there's a few. So nutrient depletion, a diet and foods devoid of nutrients. Excess fat is going to interfere with metabolism, but also environmental toxicity. Toxins from our food supply, our air that we're breathing, the water that we're drinking. This accumulation of toxins has actually been well established and determined to slow down our metabolism, because that's kind of a protective mechanism of our bodies. So those are our 3 things, and I would really like to talk about the 4th thing that slows down the metabolism, because this is one thing that most human beings slip into, and this is the thing that when I bring up, most people look at me like I've got 10 heads. But the thing that slows down metabolism is not eating enough. Starvation, caloric restriction, dieting, being in a calorie deficit is the number 1 predicted, reliable way to slow down metabolism.
So those yo-yo diets, people they go to a diet, they stop the diet, they go to another diet, and
yeah, well, if you're not eating enough food, the body knows how to turn down metabolism so that you preserve the energy that you have. The body doesn't know that you're just going on some diet for a week or 2. The body is trying to preserve itself. So metabolism turns down. So the approach to lose weight healthfully is to create a healthy metabolism by eating an abundance of carbohydrate-rich whole plant foods that are naturally nutrient dense, naturally low in fat, and naturally low in toxic load. Because back to the animal products, you and I are animals. We're living on planet Earth. We're eating the food, drinking the water, breathing the air. Same with the chickens and the cows and the pigs. And we accumulate toxicity in our body just by nature of breathing and drinking and eating, even a natural diet. So chickens and pigs and cows, they're also accumulating toxicity in their environment, especially conventionally grown chicken, pigs, and cows. And those fat-soluble toxins accumulating in the food chain in animal fats if we eat a dose of animal fat, a steak or an omelet or, a glass of milk, then we get the fat and protein from that animal product, but we also get the toxic load from the animal product.
So if I conclude that, if I summarize that, means that for you to have a efficient metabolism, you need to not eat processed foods, not eat animal products, not restricting your eating, and take care of the toxicity.
Yeah.
Maybe we're gonna talk about it with the cleansing in a minute.
Sure.
But one more thing that I have to ask you, now that we got into this, what do you think about the fasting? A lot of people talk about fasting, right?
Yeah, fasting is a therapeutic strategy. And are you talking about just like not eating for an extended period of time?
Yes, a lot of people.
Fasting?
A lot of people want to lose weight by fasting, right? And what would you tell them about fasting? They're doing it wrong. They have to do it right. It should be good to fast, or they should not fast at all.
Well, we should all be fasting every day, right? And of course the topic of intermittent fasting is very popular, right? And to me, intermittent fasting just means normal, healthy eating, no midnight snacks, right? So you eat dinner at 6 or 7 o'clock, you wake up, you drink water, you move your body, you do some chores, you go about your business, and then 9 or 10, maybe 11, 10, whenever natural, authentic hunger kicks in, then we have breakfast. So we should be fasting every day for at least 13 hours.
So just to clarify this, because a lot of people think different than you and I, of course. I should say everybody think different about you and I. But I think a lot of people take fasting as they should not be eating. And what you're telling me...
Just no food for like a day, 2 days, a week.
Sometimes, so intermittent fasting, they think they should not be eating during the day. And then they should be eating a lot or not eating enough. So if I'm not misunderstanding you, is just don't snack, don't overeat, intermittent fasting, and then eat your normal portion. Just make sure you have enough calories.
Sure, yeah, exactly. So when people are eating whole food plant-based, the foods that we're eating are much less calorically dense, right? You have a cup of black beans, for example, versus a cup of ground beef or chicken nuggets or whatever. The black beans, those are, in terms of the whole plant foods, black beans and potatoes and rice, these are more of the calorically dense plant foods, but they're still nowhere near the calorie density of beef or chicken or milk or cheese or anything like that. So we do need to eat more when we're eating nutrient-dense plant foods, absolutely. So you brought that up, but yeah, fasting is an amazing therapeutic strategy, and back to nature, animals fast when they're injured and sick so that their digestive system takes a break and their energy that they have goes to support the healing process. So understanding that fasting is a therapeutic strategy that we can use to heal, but it's not a therapeutic strategy that's effective in sustainable, healthy weight release, because we're going to deplete the glycogen that's stored in our liver. We're going to deplete, start burning some of the fat that's stored in our body. We're going to deplete water, but we're not creating energy. We're not creating health. So you're kind of bringing up this topic that really weight release and maintenance is just a normal, natural consequence of health. So the goal that I see, and back to my specialty and how I've gotten into more of metabolic health and weight release, because a lot of people have goals of weight release and metabolic health, but that's never my goal. My goal is never, hey, Sandra, let's lose some weight. Hey, Sandra, Debbie, whatever, Joe, Bob, let's lose some. That's never the goal. The goal is, hey, let's get healthier. Let's create more health.
And that promotes the weight loss.
That, you know,
naturally.
If you have weight to release, you will release it, you know? But what I see as way more fulfilling and important than weight release is feeling good.
So you can, completely.
It's like, you know, I've seen some skeletons walking down the street that look like they're about dead. Are we measuring health just on weight? And like, you know, it's like, you know, meth addicts, they're in good shape in terms of their BMI. Not very healthy. Cigarette smokers, that's a good way to kind of, you know, be nice and lean if you're just smoking cigarettes all day. You know, that's not the point. The point is to create health.
Yeah. So what you're telling me is reverse engineer. Instead of focusing on the weight loss, focus on your health. So the rest happen alone.
That's my focus from you know, obviously I'm a, you know, naturopathic doctor. I'm not like a weight loss hacker, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So now let's talk about what we've been passing in this couple minutes ago, cleansing. Let's talk about the toxicity and how cleansing can help you with the weight loss. And
yeah, well, I'll have to say that really, you know, I enter this portion of the conversation very cautiously because I think a lot of people have unhealthy relationships with cleansing. My goal, again, is to live a cleansing, detoxifying lifestyle, you know, 365 days a year. A lot of people just want to do a 10-day cleanse a couple times a year.
Like a diet.
Yeah, like
instead of taking it like a lifestyle, they take it just like a diet. Instead of taking it like a lifestyle, they take it as a diet.
Yes, and that being said, you know, I live a whole food plant-based lifestyle. I eat pretty darn well, 99.9% of the time, right? And I still personally cleanse, quote unquote, 4 times a year with the seasons. And the reason why I do that is a couple of things. One is to give my taste buds a little bit of a reset, you know, because things like added salt, added oils, added sugars can mess with our taste buds and create a hyperpalatable response, change our neurophysiology. And it's good to kind of keep that in check, you know, in terms of, it's like rotating the tires. It's like getting the oil changed. It's just like kind of maintenance for me. So that's one reason. And then the other thing is to focus on, you know, I brought up the concept of nutrient density. Focusing on the most nutrient dense foods for a period of time gives specifically the liver the proper environment to process through all of the toxins, again, that we're naturally accumulating. Even though I drink filtered water, even though I try to eat as much organic food as possible, even though I have an air filter in my house, even though I live in the mountains and I'm trying to live a pure lifestyle, toxins are everywhere. I mean, all you got to do is go in Bed Bath & Beyond when all the artificial fragrances, you know, they're just permeating everywhere. Walking past someone with perfume, it's like you're breathing that in.
All you have to do is turn up to the sky and see all those planes going with the chemtrails.
It's everywhere. So the fact is we can't escape toxicity in our world. So from my perspective, we must be more diligent to give our body the resources that it needs to cleanse appropriately.
I honestly think that I need to work myself more in that. I think I'm lacking that part of my health. I think that I have a room to work on that. So
yeah, so a cleanse from my perspective is just a period of real, you know, nutrient dense eating. And yeah, at Alter Health, our business, we have kind of formulated a cleanse with a few phases that's really designed to take anyone off the street. You know, they don't have to be a healthy eater. They don't have to be a vegan or whole food plant-based eater. Anyone off the street, people can gradually move into more nutrient dense eating and hopefully not experience real side effects. Because we know that as we give the liver the environment it needs to process through toxicity, a lot of people start getting sick, whether it's headaches or fatigue or a recurrence or flare-up of other symptoms. That's quite common when cleansing. So we want to we want to avoid that to the best that we can.
Minimize it.
Yeah, and so not being extreme, I guess, is the name of the game. So yeah, for anyone who wants to check out the next cleanse we do will be in July, the summer cleanse.
Is that every July?
Yeah, we do one, every summer, fall, winter, and spring. So usually July, January, April, or July, October, January, April.
Okay, perfect.
Thereabouts.
I listened to one of your podcasts.
Which
you
one?
talk about grains.
Okay.
You had a very good explanation about real grains. There are plants, seeds, and you talk about the pseudo grains.
Oh.
They're not plant seeds. If I misunderstood that, and talk about how some people discriminate grains, and grains are good for you. Mm-hmm. Just give you, if you want to listen more to that, I'm gonna be sharing the podcast here in the note shows. You're gonna see it there, and also gonna be sharing the website where the cleansing that is happening here in July.
Yeah, the podcast is called Alter Your Health.
Alter Your Health. There you go.
There you go. So you can find it on the podcast platforms. But yeah, what was your question about grains?
Can you give us just a quick summarize about that?
Well, grains are plants. Grains are plants, and they've got carbohydrates, they've got proteins, they've got fats, they've got fiber, they've got vitamins, they've got minerals, they got water, they got everything that we need. So some people are afraid of grains, and a lot of people associate grains as bread or pasta or donuts or cookies.
Yes, I didn't think about that, and that's true.
And yes, grains can be processed to create a flour, to bake all sorts of stuff. And a lot of people think about breads and pastas as like really bad. And from my perspective, of course, conventional, like white flour, no nutrients. Yeah, and especially non-organic, all the chemicals and herbicides and pesticides, not good at all. But the problem with bread generally isn't the bread. It's the mayonnaise, it's the cheese, it's the salami, it's the context in which the bread is eaten. Also, fresh, assuming it's organic wheat pasta, again, it would be better to eat the intact whole grain with all of the nutrients preserved. But most people don't eat just pasta with tons of vegetables, and most people eat pasta with oil and cheese and butter and meatballs and
bread,
and then the side of bread. Did that answer your question about grains?
Yes, I think that was a good summary, and I recommend people once again go check the podcast, go check this conversation about grain, that talk that you have in your podcast. Like I said, I'm gonna link it here. Now, we've been talking a lot. It's great information. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for giving us your time. I just have 2 more questions.
Cool.
One is, what are 3 things that you will recommend people for them to stay healthy? Only 3.
Only 3 things. 1, eat more plants. Eat more whole plant foods. 2, drink more water, but specifically more mineral-rich hydration, more mineral-rich water. A lot of times tap water is just deplete and full of toxicity, so a lot of people are drinking water without really hydrating.
How do we get mineral?
Well, first you want to filter your water. You want a good water filter, especially if you're drinking from the city water system. And then I recommend that people add some trace minerals into their water. So there's a few different kind of supplements that really just have a blend of sodium, potassium, magnesium, etc. Along with some of the trace minerals that allow our cells to access the water. So the minerals actually kind of push the water into the cells. Otherwise, the water just kind of goes right through us and into the toilet. So we want to cellularly hydrate.
Okay.
So water, hydration with some minerals, and then the third thing is don't take your thoughts seriously.
That's a good one.
Don't or as some people would say, don't believe everything that you think, because we all have crazy thoughts. That's the nature of the human experience.
We assume the worst.
We fantasize, we future fantasize about what could happen. We dwell on the past, and we take those thoughts seriously into this moment, like like PTSD, like that. As far as I'm concerned, I'm sorry, this might offend some people, but that doesn't exist. We all can create PTSD if we bring our traumas into this and then dwell on it, But we don't have to do that. No one's forcing us to take our thoughts seriously. We have control over what thoughts we believe. And we can recognize that thoughts are just thoughts. And they just pass through the sky of our mind. And we don't have to grasp them and make them mean anything. And when we're free from that, then we're just in the present moment, and we're more curious. We're more attuned to the natural flow of creativity and wisdom that inspires us to do things. We have naturally an open mind to consider the infinite possibilities that are available to us in life, and I think it's a good place to be.
Perfect. Okay, so there you have the 3 tips to stay healthy. And the last question is, 1 tip for weight loss.
1 tip for weight loss. That's really hard. Eat enough. Eat enough. And I'm saying that with the presumption that all the other things that I said are also taken into consideration, because of course I'm not talking about eating enough McDonald's. I'm not talking about eating enough junk food. I'm talking about eating enough of the whole plant foods.
Nutrients, right?
Nutrients and fuel. And a lot of people, when transitioning to a healthier, more nutrient-dense way of eating, naturally those foods, again, they're so much less calorically dense. So you go out to eat, ideally you're cooking at home, but if you do go out to eat and get the quote unquote, plant-based option off the menu, the black bean patty or whatever, versus again, the beef patty, you don't have enough energy to keep your body vital. So we need to eat more. So don't be afraid to listen to your body's wisdom, whether it's hunger, and then of course, when you had enough, put your fork down. But most people, and I'm saying this seriously, I've run nutritional analyses for hundreds of people, and 99%, literally, I can only count on if there's just a few that haven't been this case, 99% of people do not eat enough. And that is a major obstacle for weight relief, for weight release, because again, when we're not eating enough, metabolism gets sluggish, and we can reverse that easily by eating enough of the right nutrient-dense stuff.
Perfect. You hear that tip, everybody? Eat enough.
Am I crazy? Are you gonna turn me into the authorities for being a lunatic?
No, I think that's a great tip. I think it's an amazing tip, and people are gonna see this tip and take everything that you already talk about and put it into practice. Thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate your time.
And if I can be of any other support, if any other questions ever come up, just head to www.alter.health and find all sorts of resources, or shoot us an email.
Where else we can follow you besides that? Do you have a Instagram, Facebook?
Sure, yeah. I'm on Instagram.
How they can find you?
Alter.health is the business account, and then Dr. Benjamin Alter is my personal account on Instagram. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so now you know where to head if you want to be healthier. Thank you so much for following us.
Thank you, Sandra.
And see you. My pleasure.
Yeah.
Good. This is a long talk and there is great information. So I'm gonna do my best to summarize everything, but it's very simple, right? You wanna eat a whole food, plant-based diet. That's very simple for you to lose weight. So think about that when you're eating. Get rid of all the processed food. The things that slow down the metabolism is those little things that we don't pay attention to it. Eating processed food, the toxins, not eating enough water, dieting and not eating enough. The other thing that I concluded out of this video is the way to actually start losing weight is that you need to have a healthy metabolism. And by the way you're gonna have a healthy metabolism is by eating the correct foods once again. The primary source of energy of your body is carbohydrates, so don't be afraid of the grains. Don't be afraid of the real carbohydrates, of course. Don't get confused this with the processed foods. Now, another thing that you have to keep in mind is, remember, you want to be active. You want to make sure that what you are going to do here is not force yourself. Don't rely on self-power. Rely on you doing this because you love to do it. You want to live a healthy life. So it's very important that you keep your thoughts very clear as well. That you want to make sure that you don't take your thoughts seriously and talk positively about yourself. Be aware of yourself. Give yourself time alone so you are able to listen to yourself and make the right conclusions. Of course, there is a lot more information, so go again over this podcast and get every single detail so you can apply it in your life. And as you know, please share this video with people who needs this information. Think about your brother, think about your family, think about your mom, think about your parents, think about your friends, think about your girlfriend, boyfriend, think about anybody who needs this information and send it to them so they can actually get active and start eating healthy. Stay healthy, and I'll be tuning in next week. Thank you for following us.